Welcome to the Communications and Policy Committee. It is October 25th, 2023. I am sitting in for Bob Cotton. Our chair is unavailable tonight. I will take the remaining role. Is Jim Richards here?
Yes.
Is Pamela Walsh here?
Yes.
Great. Then I am here, and as well as Kathleen Murphy and Karen Fisher-Anderson. We have an agenda tonight. It looks like we're going over a couple new policies, and for that I will turn it over to Karen to take us through it.
Great. Okay. Well, we hopefully have met your request, and Kathleen is going to pull up we hope, policies. We practiced earlier and it worked. So if we can start with 694, we'll start with field trips. This policy is fairly short. But what we found was when we started looking at our field trip policy and then we started looking at the actual how it was being implemented, we found that, and rightly so in some cases, we found that there was lack of standardization between the different levels of schools. Elementary, obviously middle, and then high school. Let me start out by saying this field trip policy from the New Hampshire School Board Association, this policy, the existing one was last updated in June of 2017. And this, in its category, is listed as a recommended policy. So you have two in front of you. You have the existing one or the current one, and then you have one that has the red in it, and which should be mirrored by what's up on the screen. And the red is an attempt to highlight to you the proposed changes. There are not many, but the proposed changes that we'd like to make to this policy. And then once we get through this, I have two forms I just want to show the group. But pretty straightforward. We aligned the new school field trip request form, which you'll see as an appendix. The important things are we need to make sure we get written permission from parents or guardians before a student ever leaves school property. And that can be as simple, believe it or not, as the middle school walking over to Memorial Field. That has happened in the past where they've left school property to go do something absolutely related, like a gym class, but the parents were not, they weren't informed. And so we have a better practice. And so pretty straightforward, but happy to take any questions that you might have.
So, for families, will they have to do individual permission slips, or will it be the one annual permission slip still be allowed?
Great question. As you have just highlighted, we do it a couple of ways. In the annual registration form that parents fill out online each year, it's like 12 pages where you go through.
Yeah.
There is there's a field trip permission section. And it does say, I give permission for my student to take part in field trips. We looked at that. I called our Primex risk analyst, and we talked about it a little bit. And quite frankly, and then Kathleen and I talked about it, we thought it was good that parents know that their kids may be going on field trips, but too vague for every trip we go on. So one of the things that we did, and it's not part of the policy, it is an appendix which is in a package that should have been put in front of you, hopefully. You'll see the field trip approval form. And so we are still requiring that each of the teachers who are sponsoring a field trip fill out this form in advance. If it's an elementary school, for example, and they go to White Farm, is it White Farm, Catherine? Is that the one? They may go 2 or 3 times a year. If they want to fill out, the request we got was, can't we just put that one field trip, even though it's all the different dates, on one form? And we said, if it's to the one place, 3 different dates, that's great. If you know what they are, submit it. But then all this other information is very important. We need to know that we have the appropriate number of chaperones. We need to know that one of our staff members is CPR qualified, not one of our chaperones, but one of our staff members. And so to answer your question, Pam, it's both. We're going to make sure that the language, once you approve the policy, that the language in the annual registration mirrors and says individual notifications for each trip will be sent home.
But you won't be required to do a separate permission slip for each field trip.
You will be, unless it's like White Farm.
Why?
Well, you also I talked to the principals about it.
Yeah.
And so if I'm a third grade teacher and I'm going to go to the Apple Orchard in October, and I'm going to Boston Museum of Science in December, and I'm going to Strawberry Bank in June, I can list those as long as the parents know
And
where
they sign
they're
off.
going. And so it isn't just local trips.
Yeah.
If and teachers tend to plan those things out because you have to register early and get on the list at the sites that they're going to. So we talked to the principals about that to help them so they didn't have to do a form for every trip. And the other problem we worry about is sometimes the forms don't come back. And then we worry that if they don't have the permission, then does that mean they can't go?
Well,
And
so
that's a
I
concern.
will give an example. I had signed the annual permission slip
Yep.
form. I actually sent back a paper version of it as well. Never got out of the backpack, and so I got a frantic phone call from the school secretary saying, they're about to leave the building. I don't even remember where they were going. Can they go? But so, like, if I am a parent, so I'm going to say, like, if you're going to have me sign an annual form, then send home individual paper forms, like, I want one or the other. I don't want both. I want to be notified of slips and given, an option to opt out. But I'm in the place that generally it's like, yes, he's going to be able to go on a field trip.
Yeah, we wouldn't be able to list all the field trips
No.
on the registration.
No,
The
but
annual, and we don't always get those back, as you know,
Yep.
because parents don't always fill it out.
Right,
So that's
right,
why
that's the problem.
we were trying to come up with a way in which we could make sure parents knew where the youngsters were going and when, and have permission. Now, sometimes they'll opt out of field trips,
Right.
as you know, they have that right to do that. So,
And some do in advance.
right.
Believe it or not. To your question about written permission, we kept it vague in that written permission could be a last minute text, email, give it to us that says you're in the situation you raise about your son, you didn't return it, and so they call you, can you go? Send us a text so we're covered. You know what I mean? So that covers written permission. But what we're afraid of is unless we do a cross check on every student to see that their parents re-registered and gave permission for them to be on any field trip, we don't know that they've actually.
well, what do we do with the annual updates if we don't cross-check them to see what?
That's a great question, but I can tell you that they don't. So they have to run a class roster, and they'd have to then check against, just like they should be. And I know it's administratively a tough thing for them to do, but when they're going on these field trips, one of the things that we've required in the new approval form is make sure that you send a list of roster through the nurse. You've got kids who have allergies. You have kids who have bee stings. You have kids that have all kinds of problems. If we're not scanning those kids ahead of time, elementary school, they often take lunches. So you can see on the new form that has to go through the nurse, food service. If they're leaving the state of New Hampshire or it's an overnight trip, not only does the principal have to approve the trip, but the superintendent has to approve the trip. I know it's different for the elementary school kids. They don't normally leave. But we just have to be sure we have that parental permission because, we can't take them off school property unless we do.
So stepping back from the permission,
Yep.
I know, and this may be because the playground space is so limited, like Krista McAuliffe, they do gym classes, especially during COVID, they would do gym classes at the playground down the street. The teachers will occasionally take them out to walk off the sillies, or, around the corner. So, because we
Within
don't
school
have
property.
the outdoor classroom space that the other schools have. So, does that just stop happening, or the teacher has to know 2 weeks in advance it's going to be a nice day, and the kids are going to be a little wound up, and I'm going to want to take them around the corner?
Well,
Well-
we've had issues with that very
Right.
issue at Krista McCall.
Yes,
And it got to be, it was difficult for the teacher. Something that she had done as routine in the fall, or taking the kids out for a walk around the school is not unusual. But in the case of a parent not knowing that, having particular concerns around their child, they were not informed. And we had another issue with the middle schooler going over to the Memorial Field. The parent didn't know it. The right protocols weren't in place, and so we felt like we needed to tighten it up.
And I'm okay with tightening it up. I just want to make sure we're tightening it up in a way that doesn't exclude opportunities for kids and become so tight that it just means they're stuck in the doors all day.
We're still doing those things at Krista. They're just making sure that the parents know. And that's how we have Parent Square. It's an easy access for the teacher or the
But then
principal.
that circles back to, under this policy, that would require written permission in advance.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is where I come back to that versus the annual permission form. Yeah, Parent Square, a teacher sends out a message, we're taking the kids out for a walk today, but you're not going to get a permission slip in writing, and you're not going to get 20 sets of parents to reply during the day necessarily to a Parent Square message.
You'd have to give them some notice.
Yeah, in advance.
Which means it doesn't happen.
Right.
And if we rebuild it Runlet, the Runlet kids and the Abbott Downing kids are going to have very limited outdoor space. Right. And their teachers are going to want to take them for a walk. And this policy
Well, if you had to do
really precludes that.
Well, I guess you're supposed to give 10 days notice to the parents.
Under what?
Under the policy, or 10 days notice of advance. They're not supposed to announce a trip to the students. They've got to have the request into to the principal within 10 days before the field trip, so that they can plan, they can arrange bus transportation, they can do the.
That's not in here, is it?
It's on the second form.
It's on
That
there.
has the checklist.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah,
and
that's
where
all
is
there.
the checklist?
The checklist should have been one of the handouts that you got.
No.
For a field trip. Did you not get one?
No.
Okay, I can pass this one. And it's just a reminder. I believe it's on the bottom too of the field trip permission.
We were going to make a separate copy of that.
Hang on a second. What's that?
We were going to make a separate copy.
Oh, that didn't get any.
No,
Okay.
we didn't put it in the packet.
This is a
I wanted to
hefty
say.
checklist.
So, and the other thing, of course, is. Chaperones. We have to screen our chaperones because
Right.
they have to be background checked if they're going to be one-on-one with kids.
Is
Yes.
this checklist new or is this existing?
It's new. The two schools had a checklist. All the other schools didn't. So I took the best of both, and then we did share this with the principals in
Okay.
advance of you all seeing it. So
But we didn't make that part of the policy, Kara.
Okay,
No,
so
we
this
kept-
is not
that's-
part of the
This
policy.
is
Yeah,
something
no,
for
that's
the
separate.
principals to
Yeah.
use.
that's the process
but
within.
it says in the appendix on a form that says policy C checklist.
Yeah, no. The only appendix to this policy is going to be the school field trip request form.
Right, and then if this is the new form,
Yep.
the very bottom, see Concord School District Policy 694 field trips, see checklist on following page.
Yeah, which will be connected to the approval
Which would
form, but-
suggest that it would be part of the
Of the
appendix.
policy.
Like if we're publishing
Okay.
a document that says see checklist and we don't include the checklist.
Yeah, but we don't publish these are internal documents.
Okay.
I see. So
So this
we're
is the
not
policy.
publishing the approval form.
Correct. There's too much information on it. We couldn't share that. That's FERPA stuff. This is the policy, and then this is the process for the.
What is FERPA about a blank form?
FERPA is confidentiality.
I know a FERPA. I mean, what does a blank form? How does a blank form violate FERPA?
Well, if you post this, and people somehow, it wouldn't be until you fill it in.
That's my point.
Okay.
Right. Because we do have policies that come with appendices that are included in
Right.
the documentation of the policy.
Yep. We sure
online.
do. Yep.
So it feels like, especially in the policy, if we reference an appendix,
Would
Which
you
we
rather
do.
we didn't?
Well,
We don't have to if you don't want to. I just thought for sake
No,
of
I'm just getting
transparency.
clarification on
Yeah.
what is, if this isn't policy, then do we even as a committee review it and provide feedback?
Well, that's why we gave it to you all so you could see what was going on behind the scenes. So we don't have to, no, it is not going to be posted on the website as part of a,
Because we post appendix, like documents, other forms
Yep.
that are appendices
Right.
to
like the
policy.
volunteer application
Yeah.
and, yep, we do.
are attached to the policy. So
I mean, sorry.
What's your pleasure?
Yeah, you tell
Well,
us, we don't care.
from just first glance, I'm noticing, like, for instance, submit a chaperone list to SAU 8, attention Sarah LeMay. Could be a year from now, Sarah LeMay is no longer that person.
Yep.
If we create the appendices as part of the policy, it would require a policy change in order to make that name change.
Yep.
So I would say if we are going to include it, that we make it more of a template, like how you have at the name, or the top, it says bracket school name, field trip approval form. So it's suggesting that it's a template, that each school is gonna have to create their own, fill in their own. So that would be the case for anything that would be information that might change year to year.
Right. I agree with you on that. That was,
Alternatively, you could use a position.
right. And just update, we have a list of forms we update every year, and this would go on that list. Try and, like, investigators, when we get new personnel as assistant principals, we change them out. But, no, that's a great point. We could just make whoever is the admin person approving chaperone, volunteers.
Our receptionist takes care of all the
Yeah,
volunteer
Sarah does.
fingerprinting.
Yep, so,
What else would you like to?
I'm just concerned about how the policy, as described, and the change from current practice will limit the ability to get kids outside. As we talk about how we want outdoor classrooms and kids outside, it only works at some of our schools. And depending on where we build the new middle school, it will work at fewer of our schools. And so whether there can be a general, I like the general form as a parent, but that's just me.
Right.
I get enough forms to fill out.
I feel the same way.
I like the one form, yes, my kid can go on field trips.
Yeah, we don't disagree with you. It's just that isn't always what happens.
Right.
How you feel isn't the way.
Right, yeah, no, I know.
So we were trying to find a way to not make it so difficult, but yet be aware that the parent is aware of what's happening. That's all. And that's what we went back and forth. No question about it. You're not alone in your thinking. The principals were concerned too.
Yep.
And we compromised with them and said, you can just send out a general letter indicating the places that you're going to go. If I were at Krista McAuliffe and I was taking my youngsters down to the play field that's just down the street, then I would send a note home, say throughout the year we will be going to this location for outside physical education. And yes or no, opt in or opt out. That's what we were looking for.
well, Krista McCullough, to be honest with you, did have a form that does exactly what you're saying, Pam, separate and distinct from the registration form. In other words, Krista McCullough, I give permission for my student to attend all field trips.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
period.
Yes.
Okay, that was in addition to the one that's filled
Yes.
out on the annual
Yes.
form.
That
But
was
again,
new this year, I feel like, but
yeah, they were the only one who did that, but the point is that we can do it that way. The point is that we're then asking schools to pull PowerPoint and make sure you've looked at your roster, make sure you've compared against the annual registration of people who said, yep, you can go on the permission, you have permission to go on the trips. And then if they haven't, then the school's then still going to be required to send out a field trip permission slip for the parents that didn't respond,
But
to be sure we've covered every child.
so I'm not sure how that is more difficult than sending out a separate form for each trip.
Well, I mean, don't you want to know where your son or daughter are going on a
Yes,
trip?
and I think we can have a form that says that it still requires notification. That parents should be informed. Of planned field trips, and that can include an annual notification that this class occasionally walks around the building or whatnot. But you're saying like it's so much work to pull this list. Well, they'll have to pull the lists they'll have to collect and pull the lists every single time and follow up with the parents if they don't get one back because they don't want to leave a kid behind.
Right. But
So you're suggesting potentially an opt-out rather than an opt-in for every, that parents
I'm
receive proper notification that a field trip may take place, and they may opt out of that field trip as opposed to you must opt in. Or
I
or
think
you cannot
they
go.
should still be required to sign an annual form, but then if there's, if they're going to see a movie that a parent feels is inappropriate,
Right.
right.
they should have the ability to opt out.
Right.
But, I don't know. What do you think, Jim?
I think it's not gonna be perfect, no matter how we do it, but I would think that you have a couple different kinds of trips here. So if I'm opting in on an annual basis for my child to walk around the school, to go off of grounds and within a 2-block neighborhood,
Yeah.
then I don't have a problem in the fact that I opt in at the beginning of the year, and then I can opt out for individual items, like, all right, I don't want my kid going outside anytime during the next 2 weeks because, they have allergies or whatever reason. And then I think for individualized trips, like, we're going to a Boston museum, that would be another form that you'd have to sign in on. But I don't have a problem with a general form, and I see Pam's point is that, every time it's nice out and we're gonna go outside and walk around because it's hot, a 10-day or even a 4-day lead time to try to get all those forms is going to be totally impractical, and those kids are just gonna end up sitting in the classroom. So I think there's 2 levels of field trip per se.
An outing versus
Or
a
outing,
trip.
however you want to.
Right, like creating 2 different categories,
We just
I
did,
guess.
I know Abbott Downing does their Veterans Day Parade. We just did Walktober at Krista McAuliffe. I don't think there were any permission slips for the,
No,
kid-
in fact,
the
I was
kids
just,
to do the walk.
I was just on my phone trying to find, because my kiddo just went on a field trip, and I don't remember signing anything. We just got a Parent Square notification, hey, this field trip's coming up. Don't forget to, have them in the right attire. And because I'm a tired parent, I have no memory of signing anything. I'm like, I probably signed something. I don't know. And also, that also means that my kid actually gave me the forms that were in her backpack. So,
Or
which
they
is-
got out of the mailbox into the back.
Yes.
The-
So
That's
the
a-
whole-
there are many obstacles along the way, and I'm thinking of the teacher
With the piece of paper.
Yeah, with a piece of paper, and so we have Parent Square. Can that count as written permission? It can, I don't know. Does it have to be this piece of paper every single time? And this is not to be an annoyance. It's just thinking about how to most effectively get the teacher what they need so that the kids can go out, and also so that the district is accountable for where all the kids are all the time. I understand that it's a very difficult
It is, yeah.
task.
Oyster River, for example, they have an indemnification and liability waiver for every single trip they put their kids on. And when I called Primex and said, we don't do that, they said, we understand that, and the district at large, buses have insurance, things like that. A lot of the paperwork isn't worth what it's written on. But just imagine the liability if we have a kid out walking around the neighborhood and a car jumps a curb and a kid gets hit, and a parent said, I had no idea my child was going to be part of that. I think there's a liability factor. We just need to be thinking. I understand what you're saying, but and then it's mostly what we're talking about, the younger kids, and then you have your middle school, high school trips, as well. So trying to find that standardized, because the different levels has been a little challenging.
I mean, is it worth considering? I mean, different policies for different age ranges of children, or should it be uniform?
Well, we were trying to make it more standardized. You know, it's always a good idea, even in high school, when the kids, you may have somebody who's asthmatic. We need to be sure that there's a grab bag, that there's a bag to-go bag, that the nurses have ensured that medicine is there, that kids who get regularly scheduled medicine get it. So that's why, again, we want to make sure if we're sending our kids
So I offered
off.
this compromise to the principals.
Yep.
Just let families know, each grade level, let families know at the beginning of the year what the trips are. Just say, we're gonna do the trip to the local playground area. Just let them know that they will be off the formal campus, if you will, of the school and on to city property. And they seemed okay with that, as long as there was some way that we let parents know and allowed them to opt out if they needed to. And it would be simply, I don't want my child during the 23-24 school year to go to the local playground or leave the campus for whatever reasons they have. That they seem to be okay with that. Third grade takes 3 trips. They can do one form for all 3 trips. They don't have to do a single form for every trip. And that we would also allow any form of permission, whether it's text message, email, phone call, if a youngster
Well, a
didn't.
phone call is not allowed under this policy.
Right, it has to be written, right, written permission, but it could be a text or a
Who do you
email.
text? Does the teacher have to give you their private cell phone number to text them?
No, you just text the front office of the school.
How do you text the front office of the school?
Okay, send an email.
I'm just saying,
saying,
this
you know,
is a
something-
legitimate, like, you can't text.
Yeah, but Pam, the first time a parent doesn't know their child has left a school
No,
ground and
hey,
something bad happens.
I'm focused on where you're saying they can text, and I'm saying, how do they do that? And that's a
Okay.
legitimate question if you're offering that as a solution.
Okay, how about an email? Some sort of written communication so that we can say this parent was informed that this child left school property and they approved it. You know, whatever that is.
So it sounds like it may be worth providing a little more detail of what constitutes written permission.
Well, we left it vague for that reason, but we can, if you want to put exactly what it constitutes, we can add that in. Yep. Text, email. Well, you're saying text. You're right. Email, written. What other forms would?
Well, does the annual form that they signed count or not count?
Right.
Are we under this policy?
The annual form doesn't tell you anything. It
All right.
just
Well,
says
then
they
we
have
have
to
to
make
we should
delete the
eliminate it.
annual form from our annual update. Then, if we're
Right,
not
I
going to
don't think
use it,
I
then
don't
we
think
should
holds
update it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't think it's effective at all. And again, people do not update that every year. It's just
Okay.
not I mean, we
It's
want
not
it, we want
effective.
them to update it, but we
I
don't.
have it. Yeah. I mean, it's just a simple. It currently says. Hang on a second. I apologize. Here's Krista McCullough's, and then because I pulled all the forms to take a look at, and I think let me see. Beep. And then again, you get, you know, as you get more complicated, you got kids leaving the state, you got overnight trips. Okay, fingerprinting, hang on. Okay, field trip permission. My child has permission to participate in school-sponsored field trips, both within the city of Concord and to places of educational interest in nearby communities or adjoining states during the current school year. Okay, so that's in direct violation of this policy, because currently, right now, you can't leave the state without, and this is one of the reasons. So I had added language that is consistent with this policy into the annual. All field trips will be approved in advance. Parental notification will occur prior to students leaving school grounds, and all field trips will comply with the requirements found in Concord School District 694. So I was trying to make them align, but if you don't, you know, we can either align them, we could eliminate the one.
I'm sorry, is that the annual?
Yes.
That's the annual update. Okay.
Yep, yep.
So that goes out to all schools for all kids of all ages?
Yeah, and sometimes we get them back, and sometimes we don't.
But I think my question is, are we going to just, if we're not going to
Right.
accept parents approving it on the annual update,
Right.
then should we just remove the form from the annual update? If we're saying it doesn't count,
Yep.
I understand what you're saying, we don't get them all back,
Yeah.
but that's a different question than whether they count. You know, so if you signed it, does it matter or no?
Doesn't have enough information on it. I'm not sure it stands
So,
by itself.
so then
I
you're
don't-
saying it
I
should
think
be
it's-
eliminated.
Right, I think you could probably eliminate that and just do a regular notice sent by the classroom teachers or the principal around the trips during the year. Otherwise, it's just, it doesn't help solve our problem of where are the kids. That was the only problem we had with this. Where are they? And does the parent realize where they are? And how do you manage that?
Perhaps we could add language in the policy that talks about school-sponsored or trips within the city of Concord on foot or something else. We could put something about local if you would like to put that in for, again, it's applicable mostly just to the well, that's not true. I know the high school was going out to White Park for ecology trips because they drain the pond. Maybe we put something in there that says this includes the ability to take a local walking trip. You know, at the discretion of a teacher, if that's. Yeah, no, sorry.
I'm trying to give you some what to do. All right, let's do this. Let's take this policy, we'll take it back, and we'll add some new language, and see if that doesn't suffice. But I agree. I don't want people filling out the registration that says field trips, this form that says field trips, and then the teacher sends out another thing that says field trips. Parents get overwhelmed enough with all the paper. How do we keep them informed? And we only need to do that once.
And Susan did say she would try. She said this will put a challenge on us, but we will try to name all of our field trips up front at the very beginning of the
Yeah.
year, so parents are notified
Can
once.
it do so? As a parent who uses Parent Square and has the Parent Square app, that has been a primary mode of communication between my daughter's teacher. Is that also true for all the schools, all ages, district-wide? Would you say that communication tool is consistent?
That's the one we use for all communication out of the schools.
Okay.
And this office.
So if, for instance, a teacher filled out a form at the beginning of the year to their principal to say, here's the field trips we're going to do, and parents are aware of those field trips, but still 10 days out, each parent gets a notification that, remember, here's this field trip that's coming up. That's not we still need your permission. It's, here's a reminder of something you've already opted into. You would say that would be an effective communication tool, regardless of age, grade, or school. Okay.
Yeah, this policy doesn't really, it says a field trip must be sent for it doesn't really talk about what the notification process
Right.
is, how long it should be, should there be different notification for, so if you get a general permission that my child can walk places within a 4-block radius of a school, whatever it is, do they have to notify I'm taking the kids out for a walk today, or is that good?
I would just say it would be a general notice at the beginning of the year that there will be occasions when we will take students out in the local area, the city, if you will. I mean, some of them might walk down to the library, the public library, or the state house, or the.
I don't think I've ever gotten a notification for Project C.
And he goes over to White Farm to do their activities.
I assume so.
Yes, he does. Just so you know.
He's there. Right.
Now, I was gonna say, when I had children in elementary school, we signed a permission slip for going to White Farm for Project C.
We're just trying to systematize
Yeah,
the spiritual
and I-
stuff, and it's hard because they've all been doing something different.
Right.
Notices are different. We've been caught a few times, parents not knowing, and we're trying to figure out a way to do it. But you're right. I mean, I, as a classroom teacher, I took my kids outside all the time. We would take a walk. We would go through the woods. We would do.
I mean, at Broken Ground, if they go into those trails that we've been hearing so much about, that's
Yeah,
off. Well, it's not off school district property,
No, school
but it's
district.
off school grounds.
Right, right. But parents want to be noticed that those kids are out in those paths.
I agree, and I
I think that a notice, the principals send out a notice throughout the year. Students will have an opportunity to be out on our paths. I know some of the kids go snowshoeing out there, and they do snowshoeing over at sea. So over at White Farm. So we're just trying to figure out how to get that message to the parents.
and I agree. You know, they should be noted. You know, but I just think we can't make the policy so strict that we're.
I agree with that concern. I mean, the way that it's written, how a field trip consent form must be sent for each child participating, and no child may leave school grounds unless written permission has been granted. But then we have all this wiggle room with Parent Square and texts and emails, or, you know, the front office calling and being like, hey, we don't have your signature. Is it okay if they leave? That's not written permission. So it restricts you guys from getting the information you need.
I think we need to put in a paragraph about something to the effect that throughout the school year, students will be taking short trips in the city, and the parents will be notified via our communication system. I'm assuming we'll stay with Parent Square
Right.
for a little while longer.
Right.
And
I mean,
an
we just got
opportunity to
pickup
opt in,
patrol,
and an
you know.
opportunity to opt in or out.
Yeah,
That's all.
I think if we give, that if we make clear that schools can give parents a general description of in-town field trips and get a general consent at the beginning of the year, and anything that is leaving Concord will require.
Because we want to be very.
And then if
careful
we
with
want,
this.
if we want to know on a day-to-day basis, if we want parents to know on a day-to-day basis if a teacher is taking the kids for a walk, then I think we need to add a notification section to this for those types of things. I do think that will probably mean that kids get outside less, because it will have to be pre-planned in advance in a certain.
We've got to have a general notice, and
Yeah.
then you can do it. I mean, let's face it, tomorrow and
A general notice
Friday,
I'm fine
the
with.
temperatures are in the 70s. They're going to want to have the youngsters outside. It's perfect time for them to be outside. We want them outside. So we have to do a better job at describing that in this policy around notification process.
Are you all in agreement that you want to do away with the annual notification in the pre-registration?
I mean, that's not policy bound, is it?
No.
No.
Well, then
I-
I think you can make that call.
Yeah, I
right?
think it's just a question is, if you're not going to accept it, then don't
Right.
make people fill it out.
Well,
If you
but
will accept it, then I will happily fill it out.
it seems to me that there are different levels of, if I have no problem signing an annual thing that allows my, 6-year-old to go for walks around the school or within 2 or 3 blocks of the school.
Right.
If they're going to, Pennacook Lake, which is in the city, I now have maybe some other concerns, and I would think that would be a separate permission.
Right, because you got
So,
transportation
We
involved.
got
and
transportation involved,
chaperones.
you got the risk of water
Yeah.
involved,
Yep, you
there's
got
gonna
all
be
kinds
other
of things.
parents who are going to be concerned about that. And so that's why I think there's a degree in this. I think the annual one is fine for just, as Pam said, during the year, we will take, we will periodically be taking kids outside and going for walks within the 3-block radius or 4 blocks or whatever you half
In the
mile, whatever
neighborhood.
you want to put in there, radius of the school for the purpose of, you know, exercise and I wouldn't have a problem signing that knowing that, you know, on a nice day, my kid's gonna be walking around. I would want to have one know where they were, you know, they're going to take a bus trip out to, you know,
Right.
the White Farm, they're gonna be outside. None of your folks know that my kids get poison ivy like you would not believe. And, you know, those are things where a parent would wanna, you know, maybe have
Where they get
an
it,
option.
yeah. All right,
Yeah.
okay.
In my
Let
opinion.
us tweak this a little bit, get a little bit more information. I like the section around notification. I like that idea of putting it right into the policy. Again, I think there is a differentiation between those little small trips that the kids do a lot
Yeah.
and versus a trip that requires transportation and.
Yeah. And would you like us to pull the language on the form, the field trip request form?
She's asked, that's my decision.
Oh, in the
Yes.
policy.
Oh, in the
Oh,
policy,
right,
the
right,
appendix,
right.
I mean, we
Yeah.
can think
Yeah,
about that, I
I'll
guess,
think about
but.
that.
Okay, okay.
And I will say just one more request. I know that we're using the words in red to show changes to the existing policy, correct?
Correct.
So there are other things in this draft that have been changed from the current policy that are not in red. But they're mostly technical. So for instance, the current policy, the very first sentence is, the school board believes that field trips, and it's been switched to Concord. So there are several of those small technical changes that are cleanups that I appreciate that maybe they don't rise to the level of discussion and so they're not in red. But if we are gonna represent all changes being in red, then all changes should be in red, or however we're gonna show it. Another one would be, you know, the next sentence, it's silly, but to reinforce, enhance, and broaden the academic instruction, and that "the" has been taken out, rightly so, but it's not seen in the draft. So it's just little things like that. Maybe a compare doc and Word would be helpful to spot those. And then before we moved on, do we as a committee want to look at these two pieces of the policy where words are recommended for deletion? Or do we want to let them tweak things before they bring it
I would
back?
let them tweak and then we
Okay.
could come back.
Okay.
I think the word.
So like for instance, Kathleen, that paragraph that starts with trips will be properly supervised, fourth down.
Yeah, oh, yeah, I
For-
see it, yep.
mhm. So in our draft, it actually says trips will, and in red, always,
Always.
and then paren, recommend
we-
deletion of always.
Yeah, that was my note, because I thought always was redundant, or made it, I mean, why wouldn't they be properly supervised? So
Yeah.
it seemed redundant. And
So you want me to leave it in, but keep it in red?
Well, that's,
or
if
do it-
we're just noting changes in red, then we might as well just leave it in until it's approved.
Okay,
Cause it is so on our printed version.
yeah, I actually told Karen to take it out.
No, it's, again, it's really just about consistency for when we take it to the full board. I think the full board really trusts this committee to say this represents the changes that we're making to the policy, and it'd be nice if they were able to see all of the changes.
Yeah, I mean, you can get rid of always, just make it strike through.
Right,
in that.
exactly.
So that
If
will
you're
indicate
comfortable
to
with
us that
strike
that is
through.
going away.
Mhm.
The other thing I would just tell you to be very cognizant of is, you know, if you're gonna put something where it says must be sent and must have a signature, you're not gonna be able anywhere else to say they can opt in on Parents Square, because that doesn't have a signature, so you gotta put the words that say, you know,
Yep.
that gives that option and is consistent in expectations.
All right.
Okay,
Are we
Thank you.
Are we good to close out this discussion of 694 at this time?
Yeah, I think we've given them
I
a
think
lot
we
of
did it.
work, and
I think we
really-
talked
we hit
about it at
pretty
length.
hard,
All right.
Okay, the second one is
but rightfully so.
policy number 592. This was, you have a copy of the current one. We went through it. There are significant changes to this policy. The board last looked at this back in January of 2018 and revised it. New Hampshire School Board Association revised their policy of this in May of 2018, and that's where a lot of the changes come from. This is a priority required by law policy. It comes about, and there was even a technical advisory that came out from Department of Education this year. Comes about because in an effort sometimes to build rapport with students, or to, in one case we had a class that was trying to learn how to administer surveys, and the questions were very private. There is a requirement that anytime a non-academic survey or questionnaire is given to students that is, as I said, non-academic, and as you'll go through the policy, there's specifics on what constitutes questions that may be considered, non-academic. It's heavily built in both state and federal statute that we must notify parents in advance of any kinds of non-academic surveys or questionnaires. They have to have a 10-day notice. We get to decide whether that's calendar days or school days. They must have the opportunity to review any of the questionnaires or surveys, with the exception, as you'll see under the federal part that talks about an exemption, is the youth risk survey, I believe it's called, which goes into, that's administered, YRBS is what it's called, and it's brought about, it's a youth risk behavior survey developed by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. There's that exemption to the federal requirement that parents be notified under the statute. And so this policy has been in red, a lot of additions to what's currently in existence. And so that's why we're looking at this one now. It does need to be updated, and again, priority required by law.
Do you happen to have a copy of RSA 186?
I do.
11?
Yep, I think I do. Let me check.
And then my first question.
A second. Here it is right here. And it's 186. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'd been reading this earlier, and so I'm seeing the New Hampshire state law requirements and the federal law requirements, but there are additions to sort of the general section that seem beyond what is required for state and federal law. I'm wondering, why did you guys make the choices that you did to add 2, 3, 4, and 5 to the general section?
Those were the recommended New Hampshire School Board Association recommended sample policy provisions.
Okay.
So, and I can provide that if you want to see that one too. So, what we try and do is follow, because they've done the research, as a partner to that and a member. We try and follow. We take a look at their sample policies. They're supposed to be the floor. That's the bottom requirement, and then we ship them out to our stakeholders. Make sure we make them so that they're tailored to how we actually do it in the district.
Mm-hmm.
But here's, for example, what they send out.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of that comes right from the one that they send out. And then,
Mm-hmm.
as I say, we ship it out to our folks to say, how do we actually do it in the district?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Okay, so to get more specific, number 4, A4, non-academic surveys requesting sexual information will not be administered to any student in kindergarten through 6th grade
correct.
unless required by federal, state law, or regulation.
Right.
I find the phrasing sexual information to be a little odd.
I think it came right. Didn't it come right out of the statute?
It's not citing a statute there.
Right.
You just
It wouldn't cite it it would be at the very end of the policy if it's got that statute.
Well, it has information, so the statute itself says things like student social behavior, family life, religion, politics, sexual orientation, sexual activity, et cetera, but in the general section, in A4, it just says sexual information, which doesn't sound, I don't know, it sounds a little ambiguous.
Okay. That, again, you're free to change that. That's the recommended language from the New Hampshire School Board.
And then, is it required, is the kindergarten through 6th grade, is that required by state law, or was that added by or was it recommended by the School Board Association?
You mean the language there about?
The limitation of no gathering of any sexual information whatsoever for any child between kindergarten and 6th grade unless actually required by
Yeah.
federal, state law, or regulation.
That's in the, it's in the sample policy, it's number 4 here.
But the question was, is it in statute?
Right, and I don't see it in statute.
Okay. State and federal, so there's that one, and then there's the protection of pupil rights under U.S. Code. Let me see here. If they use the actual,
Cara, are you what's your thinking here? On
Well, I guess my
K
thinking
through
is
6?
if we're amending this policy just to become in line with the restrictions of state law and federal law, I'm just curious why we've gone even further to add recommendations that from the School Board Association, or perhaps were workshopped outside of what was recommended. The reason I ask is because, I mean, we're essentially going above and beyond state and federal law and restricting the gathering of any information, and again, regarding sexual information from kindergarten through 6th grade. So we're saying as a district, we're just not even gonna engage in any of that, regardless of parental opt-ins, right?
I think it's a good question for you to decide on. I think you set the policy. Do you feel that this should be something that we not engage in for that grade level, grade K through 6?
Okay.
I mean, I think we put it, I think that's why the School Board Association did it, was to give school districts options to think about what fits for their district. And so you have the ability to do that. So if you think that that should be allowed, you know, you can say that, or you say, well, we don't want to do that at that age level. We don't want to be giving surveys that ask questions relative to sexual information, whatever that might be.
yeah, that's, I think, where they used
I think
unless
that's-
required.
yeah. And you know, again, we're putting this stuff out for you. Doesn't have to be what's here. That's why you're here.
Yeah.
Tell us what you think is appropriate. We use the data that we receive to help us write these policies. That's all.
I mean, part of my problem is every time we look at a association recommended policy, they triple the length of the policy. Which,
That's pretty accurate.
you know, and I'm not sure they make them better. You know, they add a lot of things, but
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're driven by the legislature a lot of times. I mean, you're gonna see background investigation, criminal records check for like the 8th time, because they change a paragraph.
Right.
But
Well,
this didn't
but-
get changed. This
No,
came
this is-
from the School Board Association's
the
recommendations.
These are
state
the-
law
this is their
hasn't
language.
changed.
Right.
Nope. Not since 2018.
Yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm just looking to see if,
Okay. Well, I mean, then I'll just say, I'm not a fan of the recommendations by the School Board Association. The way that they're written, I'm not sure, you know, not this new A3, non-academic surveys conducted for other agencies, organizations, or individuals must have the recommendation of the superintendent and the approval of the school board as to content and purpose. I am not sure that's really where the school board's efforts, I mean, I don't know, and you guys can speak to that if you're,
I mean, I just think our current policy is a lot more understandable
yeah,
and accessible to people. Like, we're not going to ask about this. It says it very clearly in the first paragraph, as opposed to saying it 2 different ways in 2 different pages. it makes clear what the parental notification process is and permission process is, which we don't get to until D in the, so the second page of this new policy.
Notification and inspection,
Yeah.
that's pretty much what we have now.
Yeah, well, it's the same language, but I'm
Right,
saying, like,
right,
here
we
you
didn't change
you
anything
you,
there.
you see it.
The only thing, to 10 days we changed to give you guys to decide, do you want calendar days, do you want school days?
But we didn't change that, that's.
No, that's for them to decide, as I said, but,
Now, I get, just so you know, I often will get, requests from universities, agencies wanting to do
Come in and
surveys.
survey.
I tend not to do that, only because the burden placed on our teachers is, they have enough to do.
Right.
We do have some surveys like the YRBS at the high school every other year, and, so I tend not to really get engaged with them. And so wouldn't bring it to you. I mean,
Right.
probably haven't seen any. I don't know if I'd even this policy does require me to do that. And I think, again, when the New Hampshire School Board Association did these policies and gave us some guidance, there are school districts that want to have that decision and that ability, school boards who want to have that ability to make those decisions. Other boards saying, hey, that's what we want you to take care of
Okay.
as a superintendent. So
Gotcha.
that's where it came in, Karen.
No, I don't
Yeah.
see in our existing policy that the superintendent has to approve any survey, and I would put that in I would put that in an updated
I think that's a
policy.
wise thing to do.
Not the board, I don't think, but the superintendent. But the rest of it, I feel like, is just repeating saying what's in our current policy in many more words.
right, and dividing it between state and federal law, just to make it clear.
Which,
A lot of
it's
people-
important for us in obeying the law in terms of, like, what's our policy. I don't know that we have to make those distinctions. But that's my opinion.
Okay.
Right. I mean, I'm of the feeling that if state law requires that we mirror the language of the RSA in our policy, then we should do that. If federal law requires that we mirror the language of the Protection of Pupil Rights Amendment in our policy, then we should do that. But if we're not in violation of either of those things, and the policy reads well as it stands, unless there's a recommendation from the district on changes that should be made to the policy, such as that the superintendent should approve non-academic surveys, if the school board feels that they should have a hand in not only administering those non-academic surveys, but receiving the results, because that's also part of the new language, then those topics we can certainly, engage in discussion around. But I agree with Pam that this has gotten lengthy, and I'm not sure if it helps. It certainly doesn't make things more clear, for me anyway, and especially the asterisk at the end of B2.
Yep.
Asterisk, this exception only applies if the non-academic survey is otherwise exempt under New Hampshire law, section B above. So I'm not sure, are you saying that federal law overrides state law, which overrides our general policy, right?
Right. Yep. If there's a state law in place, then we defer to that, according to that language.
I would recommend taking number 3 from the proposed policy and making it paragraph 3 of the existing policy and have it say non-academic surveys conducted for other agencies, organizations, or individuals must have the approval of the superintendent.
Okay.
And then go to state law requires. Although it might move it to a second page, and that will annoy me.
Is there anything else in there that you see that we should consider? I don't see anything else. We did put in on page 3 that one piece about district schools, because it did in the policy, it just said the school. Well, there's more than one, so we fixed that for district schools.
There's a couple small things like
Well-
the 10-day requirement. Do you want it to be 10 calendar days? Do you want it to be 10 school days?
I'm okay with 10 calendar days.
Is that good for everybody?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm fine with that.
And then the notification requirement is that it be posted, that it be made available in the admin offices, but it also needs to be posted on, and that's, I think, included in the new language, it's supposed to be included on the website. So parents can come in and actually look at the survey. And then, y'all probably picked it up, but just in case, with youth, the YRBC, if that's the way you say it, the exception on the federal the federal, let me see what they're calling it.
It's
so
the
you-
YRBS.
YRBS, thank you. Let me just see this. There is an opt-out provision. So because it's not paid for by funding that's given by DOE, that's how they tie us to a lot of this. It's from the Center for Disease Control, or CD, that agency. It's assumed that students will take the survey unless parents affirmatively opt out. So that language is in there as well. That puts parents on notice that they have to opt out, otherwise they're, we won't penalize anybody, but that's specific to that federal exemption.
I think they originally tried to write that in the legislative, in a way that said opt-in, which means you had to get every single student, and then
Yeah.
the data doesn't become valid when you have numbers of students who will opt out.
I don't know exactly what you're suggesting. I think the language we have here is fine. It says they will not, I don't think we need the history of the guidance.
Okay.
I think the opt-out language in the existing policy is pretty clear,
Mm-hmm.
and that students who opt out will not be penalized.
Cara, Pam made a motion, I think, but there was no second or anything to
I
it in
apologize.
terms of
We-
recommending.
Can you repeat that motion?
Yes,
if you
I will move that we insert in the existing policy 59G2 a new paragraph 3 that says non-academic surveys conducted for other agencies, organizations, or individuals must have the approval of the superintendent. Period.
Is that seconded?
Yes, I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes.
And at the end of the now paragraph 5, the last sentence I will make a motion that we amend that to say district schools will not penalize students, as opposed to the school will not penalize students.
Do we need to add
I was gonna
district
say, I
schools in
don't,
the
I don't
next-
see where you are, but
Where are
that's
you?
all right.
Do we need to
Yeah.
add district schools in the next sentence?
It's the last sentence of what would now be paragraph 5. It's paragraph 4 in the current. And that's a change that was made in this document, which said district schools will not penalize students. And in the next sentence, the district schools will take reasonable precautions. So making it all of our schools and not just the school.
Was that a motion?
That was a motion.
And I'll
I
second.
didn't get it.
You got it?
Are we, no, I didn't. Are we on the old policy or the
We're in
new
the old
policy?
policy,
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't.
because we kind of like the old policy.
Yeah, okay, so at this point, we're gonna work off the old policy, right?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Okay, so, I'm sorry, Pam, can you say that one more time? I'm with you on para 3, so separate federal and state laws becomes the new 4, and you were in paragraph 5,
Yes,
which is
the
prior.
last two
Prior written.
sentences.
Yep, the school,
Replace the school with district schools in the second to last sentence and in the last sentence,
okay, gotcha, thank you,
which is what you did on the new version.
okay.
All right, that motion was made, seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. No opposed, that passes.
Is there anything else in the policy, the proposed one, that you guys think is very important
Or legally required.
or legally required?
I'm gonna have to go back and look at it, because
Okay,
all of
that's
that
fine,
language
fair.
is, yeah.
So you would like to review this again before we move it to a first reading?
Well, I think we have to, based
Okay.
on, I mean, there's a lot of,
Otherwise, there's confusion at the board level,
Yeah.
and I don't
Okay.
We'll do it.
like that.
yep,
All right.
So, there's a motion to table, I guess, or we'll just
I
sit
will
on
move
it.
that we table this to the next Communications and Policy Committee meeting.
And I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
No opposed, that passes.
So we'll have that cleaned up. Hopefully it'll be an easier walkthrough. And just know that we would like to bring to you policy 430, restraint and seclusion. We've been working on it. We waited for advice from everyone. The Department of Ed just released a technical assistance. John went to some workshops. And so we think we're ready. Karen and I will work on it and get it to you for the next meeting. Your next meeting, just an FYI for policy, is November 27th. That's a Monday, 5:30.
That's the week after Thanksgiving, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
I have a couple of questions procedurally, can I ask,
Oh,
on the
yeah.
motion?
Please.
The second motion that was made, I know Pam made the first one, who seconded it?
I did.
Jim,
I have that, Jim.
You do have, Jim did that one, that was the third one, okay. And so, the next policy meeting, we're gonna redo both of these policies.
We're gonna bring both of them to them to review to make sure that we captured the.
So can I recommend that we, for the restraint and seclusion, that is an 8-page, very technical policy, how about we hand it out at that, so they can have the next time to look at it, but I'm not sure we'd get through them. I think that policy in itself is voluminous.
We'll see.
Okay,
Let's talk about it.
okay.
We're not comfortable with it. We will table it till the next.
Of course.
yes,
and,
indeed.
Okay.
We're getting different opinions on it too. That's the
Oh, I
problem.
understand.
Yep.
The principals read it and the stuff that came out of the department, and boy, they were like, whoa. And so then we hear from the lawyer from the department who says, no, that's not the intent of the language. But you read it, I read it, that's the intent I saw. I felt the same way as the principals around seclusion and what that would look like. And yet the department legal, the folks said, no, that isn't what the intent was. So
I mean, it would be helpful probably if we got the proposed poly and the
We'll-
background documents
we'll get it,
in
we'll get it
advance.
to you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Great.
we'll
Yeah.
post that in your
Need 'em.
Teams folder.
Okay.
Is there
I can't get
any?
None of
other-
us can get into
We don't-
Teams,
it's-
and only the communications committee is using it. So
It's very difficult for us to
All right.
be able to,
Do you have a
Bridges.
Teams app on your,
yes.
you do, all right. And you go in to Teams, just like this, I'm going in, and I'm gonna go all the way back, okay? So, I've opened up a lot
I
of
think the
things.
part of the issue is we can only use it on this device. So it is not very,
Easy.
it's not easy for our lives as we try to multitask.
Well, I know, so, and what would make it
So
easier for you?
all the other committees are still using the Google Drive, which is accessible on my phone, on my
I have
personal.
everything in Teams now. We really moved away from Google, Pam, because of the security element.
Well, then we got to figure out a better way that we can access it where we are.
So,
'Cause
you-
it's
when
so
you open up
restricted
Teams-
now.
When you open up Teams, this is.
But I can only open it on this.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
And
in other
that's-
words, if I'm somewhere else and I have, I wanna look at it and I have an iPad, I can't open it up on that. So I gotta carry a
Do you
whole
have
lot
a
of
da-
different devices.
Did you download Teams?
So,
I have Teams,
Yeah,
but I
Teams.
still can't get into it
can't get into
on
all-
anything but the district device. Because I tried to sign into it on my iPad, on my personal computer.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like, exactly, if I'm waiting in
So
the
you
doctor's
don't see
office and I
this.
want to read,
You don't see this.
only on this.
Oh, wait a minute.
I see.
Okay,
So
because
like I
then you
have.
go to your board folder and, you know, that's where all your stuff is.
We may just need to take a look in a different, maybe not tonight, but somewhere else where, are there any
I gotta talk, I'm
restrictions or
gonna talk to
firewalls or
Dan.
things like that?
Right, I'm gonna talk to Dan and
That-
find out why you can't access it. Because I can access it at home on my Apple, I don't carry this, I have an Apple at home and a MacBook, and
Yeah.
I access, but I have the Teams,
Yep.
system on my computer.
I have Teams on all my,
Yeah, I do
all my
too.
devices, so.
And
And
I
so-
don't. I don't have Teams. I have Outlook, and I can get to this through my Outlook,
Yeah.
which is
But I've tried that and I haven't been able to get in through like OneDrive. I've tried that.
you have to. It's
Would you
through
do me a
apps
favor?
and files. We
Would
should
you
have a
bring
tech
one of your
hour.
computers, and not that I wanna,
Yeah.
and just show us,
Yeah.
and I'll have Dan or Jack here to look at it.
Mm.
Cause I know you must be frustrated when we say, oh, it's in the folder, and you can't get it.
Right.
I get it.
It might be
Well,
nice to set aside 15 minutes to bring devices and have an expert on hand.
Yeah,
It may be.
this
Rather than
week
do it
we had a
one-on-one.
board member who wasn't getting her email,
Yeah.
and she came in and we got it all squared away, and she's getting her email now.
So, and then just a suggestion, perhaps during the retreat for all of our new people and our existing people next year, we have a 15
Like a
minutes
tech
to
hour.
just
Mhm.
sort of go over everybody's tech to make sure that everybody, so that I just
Great
would,
suggestion.
yeah,
I'll get the agenda together and share it with you.
Perfect.
well, or, you just need to make sure that the new president or new president, vice president, and executive committee all are on
Okay.
board with that. I don't wanna preempt our, next year's board.
You should happily preempt. I think. It's good.
You're happy that
It's
the
good
preempt-
advice.
But I
Yes.
just think that would be extremely useful,
Mm-hmm.
and make that suggestion to whoever's setting that agenda.
Yeah, I'll be working with someone on it, I'm sure.
Okay, could be me, could not be.
In the meantime,
Whoever.
do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
No opposed. We are adjourned.